On September 11, 2001, 4 coordinated Islamist terrorist suicide attacks were carried out by Al-Qaeda. 19 terrorists hijacked 4 commercial planes. 2 crashed into the Twin Towers, 1 into the Pentagon, and the last in a rural field in Pennsylvania.
That?
It sounded like a plane crash.
Hey, Beth. What is that? Somebody hit the World Trade Center or the
Trade Center.
The World Trade Center.
Extensive damage.
What's this other jet doing? What's this other jet doing? Holy fuck!
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Pick your reader up from under your seat. Stay on page 153. At the count of 3, everyone should be on page 153.
The remains of a airplane crash over on Lambertsville Road, and probably had a terrorist bomb on board that blew up. I don't know anything more than that. That's what I heard on the scanner. I just saw the smoke come up, and the explosion shook the house clear over here, and we are, what, 15 miles from Lambertsville.
In Washington, there is a large fire at the Pentagon. The Pentagon has been evacuated. And there's, you can see, perhaps the second tower, the front tower, the top portion of which is collapsing. Good Lord. There are no words. We have a report that a 747 is down in Pennsylvania, and that remains unconfirmed at this point, and so we will check on that.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
In wake of the attacks, the United States declared a war on terror. Determined to prevent future attacks, the U.S. swiftly began military operations, capturing suspicious individuals with ties to Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and other terrorist groups. However, legal and political constraints limited the detention of suspects on U.S. soil. This led the government to seek an alternative, one that lay outside the jurisdiction of American courts. President George W. Bush would find the perfect loophole, a U.S. Navy naval base in Cuba called Guantanamo Bay. Under a lease agreement that granted Americans control of the land while acknowledging Cuban sovereignty, the base existed in a legal gray zone, allowing the U.S. government to detain individuals indefinitely without the full protections of the U.S. legal system. Thus, in January 2002, Camp X-Ray, the first detention facility at Guantanamo, was established. The first group of prisoners arrived on January 11th, 2002, shackled, blindfolded, and clad in orange jumpsuits. Unlike prisoners of war, these detainees were denied protections under the Geneva Conventions. This ultimately set the precedent for years of cruel and unusual torture. Abu Zubaydah was one of the most notorious prisoners kept at Guantanamo Bay, but not for the reasons you may expect. He was initially transferred to the facility in 2006 on claims that he was a top Al-Qaeda operative. However, the U.S. was forced to concede that he wasn't even a member of the group. Everybody agrees they tortured the wrong guy. They went ahead anyway so they could get permission to torture other people. He is known as the Forever Prisoner because he has neither been charged with a crime nor offered any prospect of release. For 21 years, Zubaydah was used as a human guinea pig by the CIA for their torture program, where they practiced brutal and inhumane techniques. I was told during this period that I was one of the first to receive these interrogation techniques, so no rules applied. It felt like they were experimenting and trying out techniques to be used later on other people. Then, in 2019, the New York Times published an article based upon drawings made by Zubaydah that depicted the vivid and disturbing ways he was tortured. The following will show illustrations of torture methods with descriptions based on Zubaydah's direct annotations, words, and memories. Sometimes, they would use a towel wrapped with duct tape, which they placed around the prisoner's neck, and they hit him against the cement or the timber wall. They would suddenly enter the prisoner's cell and start to hit him against the wall, without any towel or even gloves, and they deliberately hit him strongly on the back of his head and back many times, and continue for a long time until he passes out. Then, they awake him with cold water and continue the beating even if he does not pass out. They will start to slap his face while they were asking him questions and verbally cussing him with obscene language, and continued to beat him strongly on his head, back, and buttocks until he collapses on the ground. Waterboarding is not only using a water and a board. In this type, they put him in a wooden coffin for a long time until he urinates on himself. His hands are behind his back, or he's restrained in the front. If he was restrained from the front, he will stay like this for days. They leave him drowned in his waste. If it was behind his back, they converse with him from a small hatch on top of the coffin, asking him things that as soon as he denies or swears that he doesn't know it, another person starts strongly pouring very cold water from another small hatch. Because the coffin is made from wood, the water would leak, but slowly. During this time, the investigators asks him and threatens him, then leaves him until the water reaches his nose, mouth, and he starts to move strongly with distress, coughing to stop drowning. Then, the investigator will come over again, and the other person stops pouring water. The water will leak from the box, but the cycle is repeated, and he'll stay terrified of drowning all day. This drawing shows the vortex of consciousness, pain, stress, hunger, and cold, where they place the detainee in 24 hours a day of intense torture, which continues for long weeks or months. They use a specific torture method, in this case, hitting with a stick in very cold weather, so the pain will be doubled. And they focus on hitting till the prisoner almost passes out, or even passes out for real. They wake him up roughly, then they start focusing on another torture method for an hour. Then, the next hour, they will use a third method, and so on until they finish all their methods. Then, they start again with the first method for a second time, third time, and so on, for the whole day and for the whole torture duration, as long as it takes. I am sitting on the chair for continuous long weeks, and I am completely naked, very hungry. I feel frozen from the very cold weather. I almost get hallucinations because of the psychological nerves and pressure on my body. In addition to the sleep deprivation, I feel that I'm really hallucinating. And then a woman immediately came in wearing very light clothing like it was summer. She sat next to me, and there were two men wearing very thick clothes, suitable for the North Pole. I didn't move at all, not even to cover my genitals, as it should be following the courtesy and religious beliefs, because really in the beginning I thought I was hallucinating. But when they talked to me, I covered my genitalia completely. I shouted to them, "At least give me something to cover my genitalia in front of that female. Don't you feel ashamed of yourselves?" They only gave me a bucket of very cold water and poured it over my head. I couldn't speak for a period of time due to severe shivering in my mouth and lips and all over my body. She stayed sitting, looking and staring, waiting for me to answer her first question. She was waiting half an hour without any answers. Then she left, and she was shaking with coldness and anger. This drawing shows threatening the detainee with rape. They used to drop the prisoner on the ground and hold him in a way as if actually someone will sodomize him. And they start using dirty sexual words describing the beauty, size, or softness of his behind. Then they will start the disgrace, using their hands or sometimes sticks in the sensitive areas around the anus. Whenever the detainee resists, the other guards would place him back in the proper way to do sodomy. They used to say loudly, "We will put this stick or a bigger one in your anus to perforate it." You can picture the feelings the prisoner suffers, such as fear, pain, and embarrassment. Zubaydah said, "I think the dialogue/comment inside the drawing is enough." I was hearing the sound of the power drill moving very powerfully and violently, and no other sound could cover it up. They were opening the door of my cell, which I stay locked behind 24 hours a day. Only when the interrogators/torturers entered. They opened the cell door of the person that they will torture with the power drill, so I could hear the drill, and the shouting, and the begging, the crying and horror of the brother who's receiving the torture. When they turned off the power drill after several hours, I could hear the tortured brother still shouting, begging, and crying. Then I hear the person who is doing the torture, shouting and threatening that he will drill the tool into the head and or foot and or rear end and or stomach of the brother who was exposed to the torture. Did they drill the brother's head? Did they drill his stomach, or his foot, or his rear end? Using the power drill? All these questions kept going through my mind for days and months, until another day when they come back and use the same method. Threat with the power drill. The same sounds of horror come back, and craziness sounds come back to my head with new questions. Is he the same brother? Did he die? Didn't he die? Didn't they kill him? Or is this another brother different than the first one? Who is the second one? And who will be the third one? Will it be me? Zubaydah's testimony is a representation of experiences that hundreds of prisoners went through in Guantanamo Bay. He is still being detained there today. What was once a strategic military outpost transformed into a place of controversy, secrecy, and human rights violations. Of the 780 men and boys that were held in Guantanamo Bay, 740 of them had never faced charges. 86% of the detainees were not captured by U.S. forces, but brought in by Afghan and Pakistani locals that were participating in the bounty program, which offered $5,000 for any suspicious person. This amounted to around 7 years' salary for most, encouraging them to turn over innocent men in exchange for life-changing money. Guantanamo Bay's then operational commander alluded to this, complaining that he was being sent too many Mickey Mouse detainees. It cost the U.S. taxpayers $445 million a year annually to keep the remaining 40 detainees there, which will rise exponentially under Trump's plan to detain an additional 30,000 migrants.